Hello, welcome to Hope Matters, a production of Mount Olive Lutheran Church in Santa Monica, California. I'm Pastor Shafer, the senior pastor here at Mount Olive, and we're so pleased that you've joined us today for Hope Matters. My guest today is the Reverend Dr. Edward Treat, who is the founder and CEO of the Center for Addiction and Faith. And Ed, we're so glad to have you with us today.
Thank you, Pastor. I'm grateful to be here. I appreciate you asking me.
So I'm sure that most of our viewers have not heard about the Center for Addiction and Faith. So please tell us a little bit about what that is and what you do with it.
Yeah, and I have to be mindful of your time constraints because it is an interesting story. So I'll try to keep it concise. I am a person in long-term recovery, and I grew up Catholic. At age 27, I went into treatment and started my life over. By the grace of God. And so I began to go back to school. I began to figure out what to do with my life. And in that journey, I had kind of given up on the church because I had turned to the church often for, before I got into recovery, I turned to the church for help and found there wasn't much there. And then in recovery, I would try going back to church to try to add to my spiritual recovery of my 12-step experience, and would continue to walk away feeling like I wasn't getting fed. There was nothing there for me. And so I went through this struggle, and I finally decided the 12-step organization would be my church, which was fine because what I saw in the 12-step meetings was more of what I thought Jesus would want to see happen in our world. So I struggled with that, but I ended up saying, okay, that's going to be my church, even though it didn't feel like church to me. So it felt like it was lacking. And this is a lesson for the Lutheran Church. So in my senior year of college, a friend and I from the program were going to take spring break and go find God. And so we got out a map of Washington State. I grew up in Washington, and I got out a map of Washington, and we looked at it and said, where do you suppose we'd find God? And we looked and said, oh, there it is, big section of the state with no roads. I mean, just big wilderness area. We thought that's where God is. We're gonna, we were kidding, but so we're gonna go find God, and we found the way to get there. It was the North Cascades National Forest, and the way to get there was to drive over the Cascades and catch a boat in the town of Chelan, and you chug up Lake Chelan for 3 hours, and they drop you there in Stehekin and pick you up later. So we said that's where we're gonna go. So we got on this boat, and then about 40 other people got on, and we were so disappointed because we thought, oh man, we want to find God, and all these people will scare God away, right? So I said, are you guys going to Stehekin? And one of the ladies said, no, we're going to Holden Village. And we were like, what's Holden Village? And they said, oh, it's a Lutheran camp up in the mountains. And I didn't know anything about Lutherans. My first thought was, oh great, we're on a boatload of happy Christians. And because my experience of the church was, Christianity was people pretending to be fine. And in 12-step groups is people admitting they're not fine. It's a different environment anyway. So that was sort of Christianity was perceived by me as people pretending to be fine. Anyway, so one of the ladies says, well, show them the flyer. And so she pulls a flyer out of her purse, and it says 12-step weekend workshop at Holden Village.
Oh my.
Yeah, you got it. So we're like, oh my God, we're going to go into the wilderness to find God, and we end up on a boatload of people in recovery. Anyway, it was just such a God moment. They invited us along, and I came into Holden Village, and I went, wow, these Lutherans are okay. They are talking about recovery. And I just thought, I found my home. It was a place. My two worlds came together. My desire to be in church, but also in a church that understood recovery and addiction. And so I was thrilled. I volunteered there. I met my wife there. She was out from Minneapolis that summer when I was volunteering, and we fell in love, got married. And then on a subsequent trip to Holden, I felt a call to seminary, and I thought, I want to go study God, and went to seminary and applied and started my my recovery process. And so I started my educational process. I didn't want to be a pastor. I just wanted to know God better and the Bible. I knew so little. And about 3 months into seminary, I came home and said to my wife, I made a huge mistake. The Lutheran Church is not Holden Village. And they're not talking about the 12 steps. They're not talking about spirituality. They're not talking about any of the things that, I found myself being able to do at Holden Village. So in a way, I felt like God tricked me. It was a bait and switch to get me into the ministry. But as I was dealing with that existential crisis, I heard about some pastors getting together in Chicago. And they were getting together because they were in alcohol recovery. They were in AA. And I was like, oh my gosh, I got to go. So I went to Chicago, it was at that time, the first gathering of ELCA and LCMS pastors in recovery. They had found some funding in the Missouri Synod and wanted to put together a support group for clergy. So we formed what became known or is known as the Fellowship of Recovering Lutheran Clergy. And our mission is to walk beside clergy in recovery so that when they find themselves struggling, they can know they're not alone. And back then, it's still happening today, but it was much worse back then. If you had this problem and you were clergy, you were thrown to the curb. Really, there was no hope for you. And we felt like we could do better. So we've been sort of an advocate for how the church treats people with addiction and helping to change some of the policies and procedures. So it's been a slow grind. The church doesn't really want to talk about this. They're happy we're doing it, but they don't really recognize us. So it's been 30 years we've been doing this and not getting much traction. We've got about 200 pastors nationwide who are loosely affiliated with the fellowship, and we provide some resources. We have a weekly meeting, 12-step meeting just for clergy, and we've developed an impaired professionals policy to help guide bishops and judicatories on how to walk along a pastor in recovery in a healthy, responsible way to help them. Is modeled after the professional organization for pilots and doctors. They've had a huge success rate because of their model. And so we borrowed from that. So it's a small shoestring operation. But then about 4 years ago, I was attending not a lecture, but a gathering of state leaders at University of Minnesota. All the state leaders were there. Amy Klobuchar got up and gave an impassioned speech. It was a gathering to talk about the opioid crisis. And so Amy Klobuchar got up and said what she had been doing to work on the problem, but she said, everything we're doing is making the problem worse, because what we can control is the laws, and we can make it harder for people to get these drugs legally. And that's forcing all these addicted people to go out on the streets and get drugs from a very unsafe drug supply. And that's why making the laws stricter is killing more people. And so it's having the opposite effect. So she basically was saying, we've done everything we can do. We're out of ideas. We need everybody to understand this is all of our problem. And I, at that moment, had an epiphany, and I thought, that's what's needed. I had this moment where I thought, there's a church on every corner in this country. If every one of them started doing even a little bit about this, we could have a huge impact. And I just thought that's what our mission should be. We should educate spiritual leaders about the nature of addiction. Most spiritual leaders are working with information that's 50 years old, and we're trying to get everybody up to speed because most people don't understand this problem and don't know how to address it. And they have people like me coming in looking for help, and they're walking away disappointed. And I'm just feeling like, well, the church has a role to play here. And so let's teach the church how to do that. So we put on a conference. How am I doing for time? I feel like I've been
You're
talking.
fine. You're doing fine. You're doing fine.
Okay. So we put on a conference in 2018, our first one in Minneapolis, and the FRLC has a budget of about $4,000 a year. And we put on a conference and held it at a hotel. We thought maybe we would get 40, 50 local leaders, parish nurses, pastors, and church leaders to come. And we had to cut it off at 200. And the hotel said 200 is your max. So we had to cut off registration. We had more that wanted to come than could, or that we could allow. And then what was really surprising is they came from Canada and 34 different states.
Wow.
And 17 different denominations. And we were like, oh my gosh, this is something. And it was a mountaintop weekend. I mean, we had some really great speakers, but it was just, everybody was just so high on the fact that the church was talking about this. It just felt like, because it was a mix of people who were in recovery, of people who understood recovery, and people who knew nothing about recovery. And it wasn't for people in recovery, it was to educate professionals about recovery and how faith communities could respond better to this problem. So best practices, and brought together some people who are doing some really effective work in this area, and had them teach what they're doing. Anyway, so it was such a great event that we came away saying we need to do this again. We did it again in 2019. It was even more well attended, and even better than the first one. And so after that, my colleagues began to say, Ed, you need to make this a ministry. This is needed. And I was like, yeah, I agree, but I have a job. I was full-time senior pastor at a big Bloomington church, and what I had done so far was killing me. I mean, it was just 2 full-time jobs as I was trying to do, and I just said, I can't. This is not sustainable. So I spent a year trying to negotiate with my congregation for how to pare back my time and do more of this work. They didn't love that idea. I mean, some were supportive, but there are those few that just really didn't like it. And I did that for about a year, and I finally just said, you know what, I'm just going to have to just take a step of faith here, quit my job and do this full time. And right when I did that, COVID hit. So I had resigned. I was out of the church for about a month, and then COVID hit. And I was really like, what have I done to myself? This is terrible. But as it turns out, and as you talked about with your own experience with doing online stuff, COVID forced everybody to learn Zoom. We couldn't meet on Zoom a year or 2 years ago because you spent the whole time telling people how to get on and how to unmute and all that fun stuff. But now everybody can get on and easily and quickly. And so we're forming. And so here I was wondering how I was ever going to develop this ministry, but this whole new way has opened up. And so we're gathering people like never before. So we're doing what we did at our conference year round now through the internet. Bringing great speakers, webinars, we're doing podcasts, we have this very robust website with just a lot of great information, and we're expanding it all the time. And we right now have got denominations, just about every mainline denomination has contacted me, and we're trying to figure out how to form up ministries that will serve all those bodies together. So anyway, it's exciting work.
Wonderful. What is the website for the Center for Addiction and Faith?
It's addictionandfaith.com.
Okay. Is and written out?
And is spelled out. Our official name has the ampersand, but the web addresses won't allow for that, so I had to spell it out.
All right. Wonderful. We need to, so people that are interested in what you're doing and how to take part in it and support it can find everything there on
absolutely. Yes.
faith.com.
Yeah. And if you really want to get a quick sense of what we do, our phone app is tremendous. We have a downloadable smartphone app, and it was designed as a resource center for pastors or for faith leaders to have all the resources they might need at their fingertips. So this smartphone app is free. You just go to your app store and look for Center of Addiction and Faith. And on there, you could get all our webinars, all our podcasts, all our events that have been recorded. So a lot of the speakers from the conference are on there. We have devotions. We have worship resource materials. We've got connections to, so if you've got somebody in your office who's struggling with some kind of an addiction or mental health issue, there's a tool on there to help find the resource in your community that best fits their issue. It's a very powerful tool, and it drills right. You just plug in your, yeah.
Okay, I'll point people to that too. And in the phone app, is it AND also, or the opposite?
Yeah, if you just start typing in Center of Addiction and Faith, it'll
come up. Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, you've certainly spoken close to this, but so Ed, you in this work especially, where do you find hope?
Oh gosh. I find hope in so many different places, but I knew you were going to ask this, so I thought about a little bit. I just got asked to write an article for the Phoenix Spirit, which is a national magazine for recovery, and the segment is called Ask the Expert, and they asked me to write about hope. And so I've just been thinking about hope a lot. I just wrote it; it just got printed. In fact, I'd love to share it with you if you're interested.
Sure.
But we are people who we hope a lot of things. I mean. We hope, I hope I don't get COVID. I hope my kids do well. I hope this war ends in Ukraine. We hope a lot of stuff. But all the things we hope for kind of boil down to our ultimate hope, and that is seeing that there's there's something bigger at work. You know, as pastors, our job is to point to that bigger thing and to say there is something bigger going on that we're not all totally privy to, but we can trust that. And so I just really learned through my own personal experience struggling with addiction, with all the losses I've experienced in my life with loved ones dying and whatnot, and surviving 25 years in the ministry. I always know it's going to be okay. It's always going to be okay. And when that worst thing that happens to us, it's still going to be okay. And so, you know, our faith just assures us of that day in and day out. And so,
That's
yeah.
true. That's true. That's wonderful. Well, thank you, Ed, and thank you for being with us today on Hope Matters. This has been Hope Matters, a production of Mount Olive Lutheran Church here in Santa Monica, California. Our guest today has been the Reverend Dr. Edward Treat, who is the founder and CEO of the Center for Addiction and Faith. And as you've heard, that's addictionandfaith.com. You can find out a lot more. And they also have a wonderful phone app for those of you who work with smartphones. Thanks for being with us, Ed. I really appreciate it today.
Thank you, Pastor. I appreciate it.
Join us again next week for Hope Matters, where we'll have another guest from around the community, around the nation, even around the world, on the theme of hope, because we believe that hope matters, and we believe in a God of hope.